What's up, Vikings Nation? If you thought the 2025 season was dramatic, buckle up because the chaos we're about to dive into today makes everything we've been through look like a warm-up act. We're talking about roster moves that could shake the foundation of this franchise, a salary cap nightmare that's keeping Kwesi Adofo-Mensah up at night, and a quarterback situation that just went from hopeful to complicated in record time. This isn't your typical offseason speculation. This is ESPN dropping bombs, insiders whispering warnings, and the Minnesota Vikings potentially making decisions that will have half the fan base celebrating and the other half calling into sports radio stations absolutely furious. Before we tear into all of this madness, do me a favor and smash that like button right now. Seriously, it helps the algorithm push this content to more Vikings fans who need to hear this. Subscribe to Report Vikings if you haven't already, because we're on a mission to hit 2,000 subscribers, and every single one of you makes that goal possible. Your support keeps this channel running, keeps the content flowing, and keeps the Vikings conversation alive during these critical offseason months. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the absolute insanity that's brewing in Minnesota. The National Football League offseason is where dreams get shattered and dynasties get built. It's where general managers earn their paychecks or find themselves updating their LinkedIn profiles. It's where beloved veterans get released, promising young players get their shot, and fans experience every emotion from rage to relief within the span of a single transaction. And according to multiple reports from Vikings Wire and ESPN, the Minnesota Vikings are about to become one of the most fascinating case studies of the entire 2026 offseason. The moves being discussed right now aren't just roster adjustments. These are franchise-altering decisions that could define whether the Vikings remain Super Bowl contenders or slide back into mediocrity. Let's start with the coaching staff situation, because nothing happens in a vacuum, and the potential exodus of talent from the Vikings coaching ranks could create a domino effect that impacts everything else. Brian Flores, the defensive mastermind who transformed Minnesota's defense from a liability into a legitimate weapon, is entering the final year of his contract. And here's the reality that every Vikings fan needs to understand. Flores is either going to be poached to become a head coach somewhere else, or the Vikings are going to have to back up a Brinks truck to his house and make him the highest paid defensive coordinator in NFL history. There's no middle ground here. The man completely revolutionized the identity of this defense. He took a unit that was getting carved up and turned it into something opponents actually feared. Losing Flores would be absolutely massive, and while we all hope he stays, the smart money says some desperate franchise is going to throw head coaching money at him this offseason. That's just the nature of success in this league. When you're good at your job, someone's always trying to steal you away. But the coaching uncertainty is just the appetizer. The main course is the financial nightmare that's about to force some incredibly difficult decisions. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the salary cap situation that has Vikings management looking at their roster like a game of Jenga, trying to figure out which piece they can remove without the whole thing collapsing. The Minnesota Vikings are projected to be nearly $60 million over the salary cap heading into the 2026 season. Read that number again. $60 million. That's not a minor accounting problem that gets solved with a few contract restructures and some creative bookkeeping. That's a full-blown crisis that requires painful decisions. Now, before the optimists in the comments start typing about how the salary cap is a myth and teams always figure it out, let me stop you right there. Yes, there are ways to manipulate the cap. Yes, contracts can be restructured to push money into future years. Yes, the cap tends to work itself out eventually. But when you're $60 million over, somebody important is going to pay the price. Multiple somebodies, probably. This isn't a situation where the Vikings can just cut a couple of backup players and call it a day. We're talking about significant, painful cuts to players that fans actually care about, players who have contributed to this team, players who, under different financial circumstances, the Vikings would absolutely want to keep. And this is where ESPN analyst Aaron Schatz enters the conversation with a prediction that's going to make a lot of Vikings fans deeply uncomfortable. According to Schatz's analysis, one of the players most likely to be cut for salary cap relief is tight end TJ Hockenson. Yeah, you heard that right, TJ Hockenson, the guy who was supposed to be a cornerstone piece of this offense for years to come, might be wearing a different uniform in 2026. Before you start rage typing in the comments about how ridiculous that sounds, let's look at the cold, hard facts that led Schatz to this conclusion, because this isn't just random speculation. This is data-driven analysis from someone who understands how NFL front offices think. The case against keeping TJ Hockenson is actually pretty straightforward when you remove the emotional attachment and look at it purely from a business perspective. Hockenson has dealt with significant injury issues over the past 2 seasons, most notably the ACL tear that completely derailed his production. He's coming off back-to-back seasons with fewer than 500 receiving yards, which for a tight end of his supposed caliber is genuinely concerning. In ESPN's receiver scoring metrics, which measure overall effectiveness, Hockenson ranked 35th among tight ends this past season. That's not fringe starter. That's backup-level production. Those aren't opinion-based criticisms or media narratives. Those are actual measurable statistics that NFL decision-makers use when evaluating players. From a pure salary cap perspective, the numbers get even more compelling for a potential move. Cutting Hockenson before June 1st saves the Vikings nearly $9 million in cap space. That's significant money that could be used to address other needs or restructure other contracts. If the Vikings wait until after June 1st to designate him as a post-June 1st cut, that number jumps to approximately $16 million in savings. When you're trying to get $60 million under the cap, a single move that clears $16 million starts looking really attractive, regardless of the player's name or reputation. The math is the math, and the math says releasing TJ Hockenson solves a meaningful chunk of the Vikings' cap problems. Now let's have the honest conversation that a lot of Vikings content creators are afraid to have. As fans, we need to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that TJ Hockenson hasn't looked like the same player since the ACL injury. That's not an attack on his character or work ethic. It's not saying he's washed or done. It's simply stating an observable reality. The explosiveness isn't quite there. The separation isn't quite there. The impact plays that made him worth the trade and the contract extension just haven't materialized with the same frequency. Injuries change players, especially serious knee injuries to position players who rely on change of direction, ability, and explosiveness. Sometimes players come back better than ever. Sometimes they come back good enough. And sometimes they never quite recapture what made them special in the first place. Where Hockenson falls on that spectrum is still being determined, but the early returns aren't encouraging enough to justify his massive cap hit. Here's where this gets emotionally complicated, because football isn't just a spreadsheet exercise. It's not just about cap numbers and receiving yards and ESPN metrics. TJ Hockenson is beloved in that locker room. He's a tough, gritty player who competes his tail off every single snap. He's a high-character guy who does everything right off the field. When he's healthy, he's genuinely one of the better two-way tight ends in the entire league, capable of dominating both as a receiver and as a blocker. These are the types of players you want to build a culture around. These are the types of players you don't want to lose. But the NFL is a business, and business decisions often require setting aside sentimentality in favor of cold pragmatism. When you combine declining production with injury recovery concerns, add in the massive cap hit, and then factor in the recent contract extension given to Josh Oliver, you start to see how this perfect storm of circumstances could lead to a divorce that neither side really wants, but both sides understand. The Vikings' decision to extend Josh Oliver signals something important about their tight end philosophy moving forward. Oliver is a more traditional, blocking-focused tight end who comes at a fraction of Hockenson's cost. If the offensive scheme is evolving, especially with JJ McCarthy potentially taking over full-time at quarterback, maybe the Vikings are shifting toward a ground-and-pound approach that values blocking over receiving at the tight end position. If that's the direction Kevin O'Connell wants to take the offense, then Hockenson becomes a luxury rather than a necessity. As a fan, this potential move would absolutely hurt. Watching TJ Hockenson leave Minnesota would feel like losing a piece of what made this team competitive. But as someone trying to look at the full picture objectively, I understand the logic. I understand why a front office might make this decision. If Hockenson can't return to being a consistent 600 to 800 yard receiving threat with red zone dominance, it becomes really difficult to justify paying him like a top tier tight end especially when the roster has holes all over the place that need to be addressed. This isn't about disrespecting what Hockenson has contributed. It's not about being ungrateful for his efforts. It's about survival in a salary cap league where every dollar matters and tough decisions separate good franchises from mediocre ones. So, Vikings Nation, here's where I need your input. Would you cut TJ Hockenson to fix the salary cap situation, or do you believe he deserves one more full season to prove he can bounce back to Pro Bowl form? This question is going to absolutely divide the fan base, and I want to hear every single perspective. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Make your case. Tell me why I'm right or why I'm completely off base. That's what this community is all about, having real, honest conversations about our team without the sugarcoating. But hold on, because we're not done with the offseason chaos yet. If you thought the Hockenson situation was the biggest bombshell coming out of Minnesota, you haven't heard the quarterback news that's got everyone around the league talking. This might be the biggest warning sign we've seen regarding the Vikings' confidence in their supposed franchise quarterback. The Minnesota Vikings are quietly, methodically preparing for something that a year ago would have seemed absolutely unthinkable. They're preparing for a legitimate quarterback competition in 2026. That's right, JJ McCarthy's job as the starting quarterback might not be guaranteed anymore. Let that sink in for a moment. According to reporting from Ian Rappaport, one of the most connected insiders in the entire NFL, the Vikings are actively losing confidence in JJ McCarthy's ability to be the guy. They're exploring veteran quarterback options to create competition, to provide insurance, and to basically put McCarthy on notice that nothing is being handed to him anymore. This represents a seismic shift in how the organization views their 2024 first-round pick, and it should concern anyone who believed McCarthy was the long-term answer at the most important position in football. Let's be completely honest with ourselves as Vikings fans about what's really happening here. The Minnesota Vikings are talented across most of the roster. They've got playmakers on offense, a defense that can legitimately compete with anyone when healthy, and a coaching staff that's respected throughout the league. But one issue keeps resurfacing year after year after year like a bad horror movie sequel: quarterback uncertainty. The Vikings handed the keys to JJ McCarthy, their first-round pick from the 2024 draft, desperately hoping he would finally be the long-term franchise answer that's eluded them since the end of the Kirk Cousins era. But let's review what actually happened. McCarthy missed his entire rookie season due to a serious injury, which immediately put him behind schedule developmentally. He came into 2025 rusty, inconsistent, and clearly not ready for the speed and complexity of NFL defenses. Sure, he showed flashes of the talent that made him a first-round pick. There were games where you saw the arm strength, the mobility, the potential that had scouts excited. But over the full season, it was a roller coaster of ups and downs. Missed reads became a recurring issue. Accuracy problems prevented the offense from sustaining drives. The kind of week-to-week volatility that makes it impossible for a coaching staff to feel comfortable, especially one under increasing pressure to win immediately. Now, according to Rappaport's reporting, the Vikings are actively considering bringing in a veteran quarterback to increase competition in 2026. Not just a camp arm, not just an emergency third stringer, a legitimate veteran who could potentially start games if McCarthy struggles. That tells us everything we need to know about where the organization's confidence level really sits. If the Vikings truly believed JJ McCarthy was the unquestioned franchise quarterback, they wouldn't be having these conversations. They'd be building around him, supporting him, and publicly declaring him their guy for the foreseeable future. The fact that they're exploring other options speaks volumes about internal concerns that haven't been made fully public yet. So what exactly are the Vikings looking for in this veteran addition? According to the reports, Minnesota wants someone who can run the offense competently and safely if things go sideways with McCarthy. They want someone who forces their young quarterback to earn the starting job rather than inherit it by default. This isn't about punishing McCarthy or giving up on him. This is about creating accountability and providing insurance against another season of quarterback instability. And the name that keeps coming up in these conversations, Carson Wentz. Yes, that Carson Wentz. Before you start laughing or rolling your eyes, Hear me out on why this actually makes sense from Minnesota's perspective. Carson Wentz is 32 years old, which means he's experienced but not ancient by quarterback standards. He actually started 5 games for the Vikings earlier this season when McCarthy was sidelined, so he already knows the offense, the coaching staff, and the locker room culture. Wentz himself got injured and required surgery, which ended his season, but he's expected to be fully healthy by training camp. Is Carson Wentz an elite quarterback? Absolutely not. Nobody's confusing him with Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, but he's experienced. He understands how to manage a game without making catastrophic mistakes, and he's not afraid of competition. That's exactly the profile this front office seems to be seeking. What does bringing in someone like Wentz say about the organization's trust in JJ McCarthy? This is where we need to be brutally honest about the shift that's happening within the Vikings organization. When they drafted McCarthy, the plan was clear. He was being groomed as the face of the franchise, the quarterback who would lead Minnesota for the next decade plus. They invested significant draft capital in him. They talked publicly about their belief in his abilities. The message was unmistakable. This is our guy. But the tone has changed dramatically. The starting job has gone from being McCarthy's guaranteed position to an open competition. That's not a subtle adjustment. That's a massive philosophical shift that indicates patience is thinning, not gone completely, but definitely thinning. From the team's perspective, this caution is completely understandable. The Vikings cannot afford another full season of quarterback instability, especially with the salary cap constraints we discussed earlier and a roster that's built to compete right now. The window for this core group of players is limited. Defensive players age, offensive weapons hit free agency, coaching staffs get poached by other teams, championship windows don't stay open forever, and the Vikings are acutely aware that they need to maximize this opportunity while they still have it. Quarterback instability is the fastest way to waste a talented roster, and Minnesota has already experienced enough of that over the past few years. For JJ McCarthy personally, this should serve as a massive wake-up call. The honeymoon period is officially over. There are no more development excuses. There's no more wait until next year or give him time to adjust talk. There's no more inherited starting role based on draft pedigree. If McCarthy wants to be the starting quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings in 2026, he's going to have to earn it by outperforming a veteran in training camp and preseason. He's going to have to prove he can be consistent week after week, making the plays that winning quarterbacks make while avoiding the mistakes that losing quarterbacks make. That's a high bar, but it's the appropriate bar for someone who wants to be a franchise quarterback in the National Football League. From a broader organizational perspective, what the Vikings are doing here is actually smart risk management. They haven't given up on McCarthy. He's still going to get every opportunity to win the job. But they're also protecting themselves from being trapped in quarterback purgatory again. They're acknowledging that blind faith in a struggling young quarterback is how organizations waste years of competitive windows. By bringing in legitimate competition, they're creating a situation where either McCarthy rises to the challenge and becomes the player they hoped he'd be, or they have a viable alternative who can keep the team competitive while they figure out the long-term plan. As a Vikings fan looking at this situation from all angles, I genuinely see both sides. Part of me still believes JJ McCarthy can develop into the franchise quarterback this team desperately needs. The physical tools are there. The intelligence is there. The work ethic appears to be there. Sometimes young quarterbacks just need time to process the game at NFL speed, and writing him off after essentially one developmental season feels premature. But another part of me, the pragmatic part that understands how the NFL actually works, recognizes that belief alone isn't enough anymore. Hope is not a strategy. The Vikings need results, and if McCarthy can't provide those results, they need someone who can. Maybe competition is exactly what he needs to take that next step. Maybe having to earn the job rather than being handed it will light a fire that transforms him into the player everyone hoped he'd become. Ultimately, what we're witnessing is the Minnesota Vikings approaching a crossroads that will define the next era of franchise football. The decisions made this offseason regarding TJ Hockenson, regarding the quarterback position, regarding salary cap management and roster construction, These aren't just minor adjustments. These are foundational choices that will determine whether the Vikings remain Super Bowl contenders or slide back into the category of teams that are good but not great, competitive but not championship caliber. The margin between success and failure in the NFL is razor thin, and the teams that win consistently are the ones willing to make difficult, emotionally challenging decisions in pursuit of sustained excellence. So, Vikings Nation, I want to hear from you on both of these massive topics. First, should the Vikings bring in a veteran quarterback like Carson Wentz to compete with JJ McCarthy, or should they fully commit to their young quarterback and give him one more season without the pressure of competition breathing down his neck? Second, are you in favor of cutting TJ Hockenson to address the salary cap crisis, or do you think he deserves another opportunity to prove he can return to Pro Bowl form? These questions don't have easy answers, and reasonable Vikings fans can disagree on the best path forward. That's what makes this offseason so fascinating and so important. Drop your opinions in the comments section below. Let's have a real debate. Tell me where you stand on these issues and why. Do you trust the front office to make the right decisions, or are you worried they're about to make franchise-altering mistakes? This is your community, and I want to hear every perspective, from the optimists who believe everything will work out to the pessimists who think we're headed for disaster. If you made it this far into the video, you're clearly a diehard Vikings fan who cares deeply about this team's future. Do me a favor and hit that like button to help this content reach more members of Vikings Nation who need to be informed about what's coming. Subscribe to Report Vikings if you haven't already, because we're pushing hard to reach 2,000 subscribers, and every single subscription helps us grow this community and create more content for you. Turn on post notifications so you never miss an update as we continue covering every twist and turn of this absolutely wild offseason. The next few months are going to be critical for the Minnesota Vikings franchise. Decisions will be made that some fans love and others hate. Players will be released, new faces will arrive, and the roster we take into the 2026 season might look dramatically different from the one we're watching today. That's the nature of the NFL offseason. It's chaotic, it's unpredictable, and it's absolutely essential for building championship teams. This is Victor signing off for now, reminding you to stay locked in to Report Vikings for all the latest news, analysis, and honest conversations about our beloved Minnesota Vikings. Skol, Vikings Nation. Let's hope this offseason brings us closer to the championship we've been chasing for far too long.